Hello and welcome to this video tutorial for Creo Parametric version 3. This tutorial will cover dimensioning and constraints. So we've previously created a new part. We will now enter extrude mode, placement, define, select the datum plane and click sketch. And we'll change this to sketch view so it's normal to our sketching plane. As always, we'll start by including center lines with the centerline tool. This gives us a good baseline for reference. We'll start with the vertical centerline by clicking once, and then twice, and then we'll do the horizontal line by clicking once, and then twice, and middle click to complete. We can then add some rectangles by clicking the rectangle tool and drawing one rectangle in space and another one in space. Then we'll middle click to finish that. And as you're familiar with, Creo has put in these light blue weak dimensions. If these dimensions weren't suitable, we could change these, and that would become dark blue strong dimensions. We can also add dimensions of our own by clicking the normal tool. So if we click that and click one edge and a second edge, and then middle click, Creo will provide that dimension that we can once again edit as a strong dimension. And you notice that the dimension between this line and our rectangle edge has disappeared because it is accounted for with these strong dimensions. If we were to over-dimension this, so if we click the normal tool and click on this line and the second line, and then middle click, Creo would give us a warning. It's saying we're over-constrained. So we have this distance here, and we have the distance between our edge of the rectangle and our center line. Therefore, this dimension is redundant. And Creo is saying, this is over-constrained, you need to delete something. So we can delete that dimension because we don't actually need it. In a similar manner, we can add dimensions to other features. So if we were to draw a line with the line tool at an arbitrary angle, and then middle click to finish. So Creo has given us, the height between the ends of our line and various reference lines, and it's also given us this angle between the top surface of our rectangle and the line. So not particularly helpful. Instead, with the normal tool, we can click the line and then middle click, and we can find the net length of that line, which is often much easier to work with. And we can change that on the fly. If we wanted to measure an internal angle, we could select our center line using our normal tool, select our line, middle click again, and that will provide us with that angle that we can go in and edit. These dimensions can also be moved for clarity, so you can move those away or closer. This can be useful for more complex models when dimensions can get in the way of one another. But once again, it's worth spending some time having a bit of a play in the sketching dialog box and practice locating dimensions using the normal tool. The final thing that we'll look at in this video is using constraints. And this is a really useful way of locking certain features or dimensions to other features and dimensions. You may have noticed some of these, such as vertical or horizontal constraints, or length constraints, where length 1 is equal to length 2. So if we were to go in and change length 1 to say 50, the length 1 on this object would change as well. So this is often what we mean by design intent. Generally, Creo will add constraints. So if I wanted to draw another line starting at this point, so they're vertical, it would snap to becoming parallel. And you can see that those lines are parallel. If that wasn't parallel, we wanted to fix that, we could go in our Constraints tab. We can select Parallel, select our first line and our second line, and they have been made parallel. If we were to change the angle of the first line, the second line would follow suit. Now, as I mentioned before, often by default, Creo adds constraints. Sometimes these can get a bit confusing or can be unnecessary. You can simply select those, then delete them, and the constraint is removed. And if I change this back to 45 degrees, the second line would not follow suit. So previously, we've looked at symmetric constraints, equal and parallel constraints. The last one we'll look at in this video is tangency. So if we had some circles floating in free space, we could make those tangent by selecting the tangent constraint. Once again, bottom left-hand corner, selecting two entities to make them tangent. We can select our line, then our circle. We can continue that by selecting a second circle, our first circle, and then once again our second circle and our line, making them all tangent, represented by the T. We can then fix these dimensions. There are other options, including making objects vertical, horizontal, or finding the midpoint, and I suggest that you spend some time having a play and becoming a bit more familiar with how to use constraints.